Okay, it is time for our Independence Day show where we celebrate democracy and republicancy. Our our exit from tyranny and our possibly inclusion back into it. Let's find out what's going on the rotation.
Marijuana in my soul, marijuana in my heart.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are we doing today?
Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, good morning.
Well, Gary, I got to say, your code open skills on par. We got to get you on SNL one of these days.
No problem. Well, gentlemen, we are here today on our fabulous Independence Day show with a great opportunity to discuss politics as normal, if you can call that in Florida. And of course, I am Gary Stein, your political director here for Suncoast Normal and the Master of Public Health. You can have my cue the applause there.
I was trying to reach for it.
Yeah, you got to get that button closer.
You know, I changed. You guys can't see the actual table, but there's a new tablecloth here, which means I had to move everything. So I'm like settling in, kind of.
Yeah, nothing worse than an intrusion by a tablecloth. And to our left, to my right, your left, is our fabulous deputy director, master of business administration, Carlos Angel Armida.
Oh, that's me. I thought you were pointing to Keno. Yeah, thank you, everybody in the audience.
I'm doing reverse rank, kind of like the way things happen in Tallahassee.
That was cute, Carlos. I saw that.
On my right, your left, or our left, your right, our executive director coming to us from above the Beltway, where he hits him below the Beltway, and along with him and his newborn son, Christopher Kano, our master of public administration.
Thank you, kindly.
I eventually will see that kid's face. I've already seen that part of him. the graphic. Anyways, and below us are two great guests for today. On our left is the much missed in Tallahassee right now, but he's always there anyway, Senator Jeffrey Brandes of Clearwater, Pinellas County, who was probably the most sane senator we ever had. And to his right, coming to us from the wild, wild west of California, still my beating heart, and still working under what's his name? The guy with the good hair, who's the governor over there.
Oh, get Newsom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a corporatist in there. I was impressed.
Oh,
but
man.
Jason Beck coming to us, not using his Mar-a-Lago backdrop, which is good.
You know, we switched it up. I'm here on the West Coast today, so.
Yeah.
How did you get the name the highest Republican? Was there some sort of contest, or did you just claim it and nobody is like taking you down? Or
I mean, I just am that. I embody all of that, Carlos, as you know.
Is there like a Republican, like at the Republican National Convention, was there like a circle that you're all smoking and you're like, Jason's the highest?
Well, everyone in that circle knows me as the ringleader in that space. So why wouldn't I be the highest Republican?
Awesome. Yeah. I'm wondering how, if I ever become a Republican, how I could go for that title.
You would have to challenge me. And first of all, Carlos, you would have to be able to have the best weed in the world. And since I already have all of the best weed in the world, I don't know how that would happen.
Now, the question is, are you getting it from a legal dispensary in California? Because those are few and far between.
I get my weed out of my pocket.
I have to use that one line. That's great. So how's the weather over there? Well, you haven't had a brush fair yet, so that's good in California.
Oh, it's been gorgeous out here. We have been, it's funny because normally summer starts a lot earlier, but it seemed like our summer weather actually started on the actual first day of summer, and it has been beautiful every day since. And so I don't know what Harp is doing, but apparently they are on the seasons this year.
That's hilarious.
And Jeffrey, how is your lovely family?
They're all great, wonderful. They're all in camp this week and doing all kinds of fun stuff. So
I gotta say,
Oh, that's why you're so happy.
Senator Brandis, we really do miss you in Tallahassee. Why the hell did you ever leave? Like
term limits.
They kicked you out, right? Like you didn't.
No, I think it kicked me out. I got, the Constitution kicked me out. Term limits, I couldn't run again. So, but we'll see what the future holds. And the Florida Policy Project has been kind of my methadone for the public policy world that I've been involved in for the last 12 years. And it's taken off. I mean, all we do at the Florida Policy Project is focus on best practices in 4 policy areas: criminal justice, property insurance, transportation, and housing. And
I saw you on
incredibly
the
successful
Tampa Bay Developer podcast.
Oh yeah,
I saw you talking about the policy project. It's very interesting. Very interesting. I'm sorry to cut you off. I just on that podcast you said I believe it was like you believe the legislator is more tactical rather than strategic.
I don't believe it. I know it. Right? I mean, like, my big takeaway after 12 years of Tallahassee is there is no strategy in Tallahassee. It's all tactical. Right. And you think about it, what other major organization changes over its leadership every 24 months? And this is the fundamental problem Tallahassee has, and why we're stuck in this tactical way of thinking. That it is that the Senate president and the speaker are going to change over every 18 to 24 months, really, and you're going to get a new one. And they're in the process. They may not have the same priorities. And so you're shifting priorities every 18 to 24 months. And that creates this tactical world where nobody can actually follow through on a longer term vision for what they want to achieve.
And the Florida Policy Project, you guys concentrate on things like property insurance, transportation, housing, and a number of different things.
And criminal justice and prisons, yeah.
Criminal justice and prisons. I wanted to ask you, I think, is there any way that marijuana can really fit into any of that?
Well, listen, first of all, the best practice in marijuana is to allow it to operate legally in a state, right? Like, that was generally considered a best practice. At least that's the Jeff Brandis best practice. But ultimately, I think that what you find with young legislators is they don't even know where to start. They don't have a context for a conversation, and nobody has kind of easily put together a list of nationwide best practices for them to begin to follow. Yeah. And so if we're going to live in this tactical world, what can be kind of the one ring that rules them all? Like, the strategy that we should ultimately be following, in my opinion, is moving Florida in different policy areas to whatever the nationwide best practice is. But somebody has to call that out. Somebody has to do the research and put that together. And so we partner with Florida-based universities and national experts to identify best practices in those 4 areas of public policy. And then we Fisher Price it down for legislators. Our reports are not long, and we put it out there to them. And we're really focused on 160 members of the Florida Legislature to identify and to advocate for best practices in those 4 policy areas.
Jason, when you were working on the legalization in California, how much did the legislature get involved versus the people doing their elections?
Well, I mean, California is very, very different in the sense that we already had a robust economy flowing prior to anything going through the legislature. I mean, we started off with a voter initiative of Proposition 215 in the beginning, in cannabis's infancy. And thank God we had people like Terrence Hallinan as our district attorneys in San Francisco, which in all reality, the only way that we had programs up and operational is because we had people in those positions back then. I mean, back then when I was on Terrence Hallinan's Medical Cannabis Task Force, we if someone from our community was busted by law enforcement, we in turn would go over to the district attorney's office, let them know that those people were part of us, they were part of our community, they were providing for sick and dying people, and then at that point in time, they ultimately, their case would be dismissed. And that's really how this whole thing really started, in its infancy. And by the time we got to anything going on with the legislature, I mean, I don't think that was like until 2010 till we had our first state bill with SB 420, where it allowed for home grow and things like that. And so there was a big difference between Florida and California in the overall creation of a legitimized marketplace.
So do you see the people actually having more of a voice in California than the legislature? And how does that work out for you statewide? Because a lot of times the people don't necessarily know exactly what they want because they don't understand the law in the first place.
Well, I didn't want to say, I don't want to say that now that I believe that the people have a real voice here in California, because we're out here in California, and and the Governor Gavin Newsom, they're just basically fleecing the cannabis industry for as much tax revenue as they possibly can, in conjunction with the SEIU and a bunch of other unions and whatnot, and until in conjunction with a bunch of other, we desperately need tax reform here in California in order to really prop up the market. It's a bloodbath out here, and it's really sad.
Cano had to go in there and regulate that. He's a union guy.
That's all right. I'm down with unions, but I also say down with unions.
Well, the service workers have actually gotten themselves a fair share of good legislation put through in Nevada and places like that.
Well, I wonder who they got working in the political department, Gary.
Well, this is an interesting show for us because you guys are both friends of the show. You guys have been on before. We get a lot of what do you call it? Flack, I think is the word, for pushing liberal ideas and pushing liberal agendas, and Cano's a union guy and blah blah blah. Right. But cannabis reform is bipartisan. It really is. Republicans. I think a poll came out about Amendment 3 that 50% of them wanted it to pass. I'm interested in you guys' take because we've seen DeSantis went and came out against Amendment 3. Now there's this whole thing about DeSantis joining with the hemp industry, and I think they recently raised a bunch of money to fight Amendment 3. And it's looking like Republicans are about hemp and Democrats are becoming about cannabis in this state, and it's becoming a fucking mess. For best way to describe it. Well, what do you guys think about all this?
Yeah.
I find it funny that you're going to characterize it in that way, Carlos, especially because your shop, you guys were all complaining about how there was this draconian bill floating through the chambers of the legislature in Florida that was going to close all of your guys' businesses. And now the governor has vetoed that bill, and yet you're still chastising him for it.
I'm not chastising him for it. I'm just wondering why we're picking one over the other. Why it seems like there's an attempt to put some division here, and there is. Ron DeSantis is definitely reaching out to hemp entrepreneurs saying, these guys tried to fuck you, you're gonna have to vote no for us and raise a bunch of money to fight it for us. And they definitely are. I was in this chat that Healthy Alternatives raised $2 million just recently in order to fund no on 3 stuff.
Yeah, but $2 million is nothing on a statewide race like that. I mean, it's at some juncture we have to realize that the pro cannabis side is going to have a vast majority of the resources for this conversation.
Exactly, they raised $40 million.
Right, and that's just to get on the ballot, and they're going to put in additional funds from nationwide sources to get the messaging out. Versus the anti-group which it's really hard to get the anti-group to come out and step out against this. Now, they don't need that much. I mean, they don't need that much messaging, because all they have to do is keep it below that 60% threshold in order to win. But ultimately, the pro-cannabis side is the well-moneyed side here.
Now, I see DeSantis as doing a more strategic move as opposed to a policy move in regards to his veto. Do you see that? Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really, look at what it shows is nobody in the DeSantis team is talking to the legislature about these types of things. It's like, this is why I think it's just wild. Anytime you have a Republican governor vetoing Republican legislation, especially once it gets to that level, right? It should never get there, because clearly his team doesn't know where he is. And I've had that personal experience. I mean, I've had bills vetoed of mine that made it all the way through the process where, you call in his legislative affairs director and you're like, hey, do you have any concerns about this issue? And they're like, no, it's fine. And then, something happens at the 11th hour and it gets vetoed, but it's because his team doesn't know where he is on a lot of these topics. So how can bills get past the floor without his team quietly saying the governor's going to veto this? Either they don't know or he doesn't know. Right? Like, that's the only way these things happen. Because it honestly should never happen that a Republican governor is really vetoing Republican legislation, especially stuff that's flying through the House and the Senate, without the governor's office stepping up and raising their hand. I mean, just as a common courtesy, raising their hand and saying, listen, we don't want you to have to vote on this if we're going to go ahead and veto it, because it could be embarrassing to your members down the road. And that's not our intent. But look, there's been a number of vetoes this year that have come out, and it's because there's a lack of communication between the governor's office and the legislature or the individual members on their concerns, or they're not tracking, or they don't know where the governor is, or he doesn't know where he is.
I'll tell you what, I was really surprised about the way the governor had vetoed the funding for arts and culture across the state. Basically zeroing it out and leaving it off to the grants, which don't come through as fast enough to be able to cover that kind of problem. And they never had a clue, I don't think, going into it that was going to happen this year.
Well, Gary,
I mean, the funding funded the grant pool, right? And there's ultimately a process by which individuals have to go through. And what it turns out is they didn't have enough money to obviously cover all of the grant pool. And most of the things the governor was concerned about were so far down the list, they would never have gotten funded this year anyways.
Thank you. That's crazy.
So that's what we're, but this is, a lot of this stuff is, talking points. It's political. And it's oftentimes vetoes are a mystery wrapped in an enigma.
And some of them are basically strategic, because the way I read the veto letter that went with the hemp bill was that you've got a 1-year reprieve. That right now we have an election coming up. I want people on my side, so I'm going to veto this now. But next year, expect to see it pop up in the legislature again and possibly go through. Do you see that?
I don't. I mean, ultimately, I don't know. I don't know where he is. I don't know where he's really thinking, and it really depends on what happens with his constitutional amendment, maybe.
Well, from what I can tell from insider sources, the veto isn't free, if you will, is what the terms is being used. And so, Gary, to your point and what Carlos made earlier, the hemp industry is going to have to pony up if they want to see this vetoed again. So, the political process in a lot of ways is now fleecing businesses that are pitted against each other for campaign donations. I think, Florida is unique in a lot of ways in that businesses can donate to individual candidates. At the federal level, it's not like that. Businesses have to go through a PAC if they want to donate. But in Florida, a business can directly donate a certain amount to a candidate and can donate to candidates' PACs. So what we see is, DeSantis saying, this veto isn't free. If you want me to veto it again next year when it comes around, y'all going to have to pony up and get the money right.
I try not to read that much into it. But I do think it's really interesting what's happening in Florida right now. So we have all of these medical marijuana licenses out there. Right. You have literally dozens of marijuana licenses and a lot of people not growing. And you have a lot of dormant licenses. It's because the market is saturated right now with the existing producers. And so we're essentially a world awash in licenses, but nobody's growing. or not enough, nobody's exercising their right to grow. And I think there's a thing that we tried to pass a couple of years ago that if you don't utilize your license within a certain amount of time, it reverts back to the state, which is what should happen, right? You shouldn't be able to get a license and then immediately go to Atlanta and try to sell it off for $30-40 million, which is what was happening. I mean, you have to understand the whole basis that we set up the medical marijuana scheme early on was a lie. Right. It was all based on this lie. It was based on, oh, listen, this is going to be 5 Florida families that have been in the nursery business for 40 years. Well, what did they immediately do? They immediately went out and sold the shares of those companies off to, national firms. The national firms now have technically been in business for Florida for 40 years because they kept the name of the same or whatever, but they own the underlying shares of that company. And those 5 families got incredibly rich. We give one license to a black farmer, like Token from South Park, right? We give this one kind of token license. Three licenses now, but it was originally one.
Yes.
But now we give 3, so we have to black farmers who then aren't, to my knowledge, actually growing. They're looking to either sell those licenses or somehow partner with outside organizations. And now you have 20, 25 licenses that are available. And I don't even know how many are actually being utilized. But the market's saturated for medical. And so the only way to grow in Florida is to get to adult use. And so this is not a question of if it's going to happen in Florida. It's a question of when it's going to happen in Florida.
Right.
It is not whether it's 2024, 2026. I mean, this is going to be coming back on the ballot every 2 years, because it's the only pathway to growth for this industry in Florida.
Senator, we covered the Pigford licenses on High at 9 News, and it's just really, really shameful that the original Pigford license that it was going to go to that family, and they had such a delay in the issuance of that license that the original Pigford licensee passed away, and the state would not even allow that license to transfer to their family. And then as a result of that, now they're giving out 3, but really, like, is that even enough? Like, I feel like that community deserves a lot more than just that.
Well, I think that, but here's the problem. You know this. Under the Florida vertically integrated structure, you essentially have to walk in the door with $40 or $50 million in order to play in that game, right? Like, if you can't put together $40 or $50 million, you're never going to be able to establish a grow. You're never be able to have a processing plant. You're never going to be able to build retail facilities that have to be $1 million a piece, right? That is never going to happen. And so it doesn't really matter how many licenses you give out. If you can't walk in the door with $40 million of capital, you can't be in the business. And so
Florida has a lot of money. Okay. Florida is not like short on funds. Florida could do a program.
You're talking about the state, or are you talking
Correct.
about? Well, but this is the problem. The vertical integration is the problem, right? They should allow you to have a grow license. They should allow you to have a retail license. They have allow a processing license and a delivery license. If they broke it up, then people could get in the business for a reasonable amount of money. But you're basically beholden to the national firms or to hedge funds or to venture capital firms in order to enter the marijuana business in Florida, because you have to. There just aren't enough investors at that $40 million, $50 million level to get people in. And if they're going to put that much in, they're taking control.
That's true.
Right.
It's interesting. We really have not given a brand new license out.
But they're licensees.
Yeah, and those 22 licenses.
Go ahead.
Those licenses you're talking about, the 22, they haven't been given out. The application came out over a year ago, and they're still being held on to. In fact, we actually haven't given out a license since we were strictly a CBD only program. The rest of them were given out through the law judges and things of that sort.
Because if you're an existing marijuana company with an existing license, you're perfectly fine letting them just continue to hold on to 22 licenses, because that's 22 people you don't have to compete with.
Yeah. Well, I just checked the OMMU website. There are 25 licenses now. Only 20 of them are actually doing something with it. Like, they actually have storefronts. So we have 5 licenses with no storefronts in Florida. No dispensing at the moment.
And are 3 of those the Pigford licenses?
No, only one is, which is that one that you had mentioned earlier. I believe the other ones are still pending. I mean, that legislation just got signed and such, so they got to process those.
Yeah,
Okay,
they
so
have to.
you got four dormant licenses then going on in Florida.
Yeah,
Right.
with the picture
And
license.
it's going to grow, and it's going to grow because it grows based on patient count, correct? And so you're going to have more and more licenses come online, but how many of those existing licenses, they may be possessed, they may be owned by somebody, but are they actually in the business? Are they actually growing in the business?
Senator, this is a good point I wanted to bring up is our licensing structure is based on patient counts. If Amendment 3 passes and we adopt adult use, I foresee patient counts going down because people aren't going to want to pay $300 for a doctor recommendation. So does that mean that we need to change? Obviously, we need to break up the vertical integration, but it seems like, wow, it almost locks in the system if we pass adult use without changing how we issue out the licenses.
Well, listen, even the current licensees don't like the vertically integrated structure. They run out of product all the time. They lose a crop. Then how do you fill your storefronts if you can't go buy from somebody else and fill your storefronts if you lose a crop?
Yes.
Right? Like, this is the underlying problem. This is why we had for years such supply challenges in the state of Florida, is because vertical integration doesn't work. Right? It doesn't work at scale for these types of businesses. They need at least the ability to go out and buy from third parties. Listen, if McDonald's had it vertically integrated and they had to grow their own cows and grow their own tomatoes and grow their own wheat, I mean, burgers would cost 3 times as much. This is why prices are high in Florida. The supply is inconsistent. I mean, this is a Republican government. This is a Republican House, Senate, and governor. And they get into this greenfield business, and they were able to establish any regulatory system they really wanted for this thing. And what did they do? They came up with the most restrictive mechanism they possibly could for how to do this. The most socialist backed, kind of have to be vertically integrated mechanism for what they could do. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
It keeps all the small businesses out. You should not have to designate 3 African-American licenses. Like, you shouldn't have to say, because of your color, you get 3 licenses. No, you should be able to say, you can participate in any part of this business you want. And it shouldn't have a $40 million entry fee to get in.
You know, Senator, one thing that adult use is going to do is it's going to open up the ability to bring tax revenue in.
Sure.
Do you think that's going to be kind of like a driving factor, like an incentive to open things up and get less of a socialist based system?
Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately that things will start shifting, right? Somebody will ultimately break up this monopoly system this oligopoly system that we have today.
How are they going to do that?
How will they do that?
Yeah.
Well, if the quickest way to do it is to allow for different license categories, to get rid of vertical integration and move towards horizontal. That would be by far the fastest way to break up the system.
But there's no legislation that pending that will do that, and this adult use bill isn't going to do that either.
Well, but the adult use constitutional amendment allows for it, right?
Yep.
If you read the constitutional amendment, it allows for them to be broken up. They want to be broken up. They want, listen, they have the storefronts that they want generally.
Yeah.
They have the distribution facilities they want this generally. They can't keep them stocked because they lose a crop, or they can't grow because they'd have to grow their processing facilities and their grow facilities, and they don't have the capital to do that, or they don't have the sales to do that. What needs to happen is you have a handful of growers, a smaller handful of processors, and a bunch of retailers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Truly recently celebrated 200 stores.
Sure. Well, but what percentage of market share do they have? 60%?
Well, whatever that market share is, if you got 200 stores, right?
Out of 653 stores in Florida.
Even if Suterra got 100 and Curaleaf got 100, and if I had 200 stores in Florida, the only way to widen my customer base is to make sure I don't have to take medical marijuana cards.
Well, and this is the other thing, right? So Suterra and Trulieve probably have a vast majority of the market share. I don't know what that is, but they have a vast majority of the market share. And then you have all of these smaller players who are just trying to make it work, and they think their license is the value of that company, not so much the actual retail sales of the product, because they can't really compete because they're nowhere near as large.
Mm-hmm.
What I find
Oh.
interesting is that Curaleaf recently put out a whole new series of products based on hemp extracted cannabinoids. The same thing that the MMTCs have been fighting against, but of course, to walk into a Curaleaf in the first place, you still have to have a medical card. So I don't know how well that's going to work out for them. But it was interesting that they actually went ahead and did that. It almost gives some kind of professionalism to the hemp industry. What do you think?
I think they want to make more of those products because those products can be sold off of their websites too on a national level, and not only strictly within their stores in Florida.
That's a good point.
I mean, that to me is the only reason that makes sense. Not
There were two.
necessarily like trying to jump on this bill in anticipation of it passing, because I'm not even personally. I mean, are you guys going to vote for the bill yourselves personally? Are you guys going to vote yes on this?
I am.
You are.
Right now.
Well, because look,
yes.
What's the alternative? I mean, these guys are going to control. They're going to be in this market, and whether it's adult use or whether it's medical, they're going to be the major players in this market. Nobody's ever going to come out and say, if you do medical, you can't also do adult use. That would make no sense. They don't want a proliferation of two types of stores. So they want to try to confine it where they can to the existing facilities that are out there and drive that business there, which is what Trulieve and Sutera and all the other medical marijuana providers want today anyways. So I don't see the state just opening the gates to this thing. I think they're going to try to contain it where they can. And if the state does go to adult use, which is a question of when, not if, but when it goes to adult use, that's how I see the regulatory structure playing out.
I think what you just said there, Senator Brandis, is probably the best point for anybody that's on the fence about Amendment 3. And a lot of it, I'm talking from the point of view of a hemp store owner. It is from the hemp side of things where, if you could see the comments, there's a lot of no on 3 comments because we have hemp followers. The thing is that adult use is inevitable. It's
inevitable. It's going to happen,
and
especially if they reschedule it.
Regardless of
I don't agree with that,
or getting vetoed or anything like that, as soon as adult use passes, hemp is going to start. The funds are going to start going down.
Yeah, look. Half of the states that have adult use today, or more than half of the states that have adult use today, did it by constitutional amendment and not by legislative action. Yeah. So this is the pathway that it's going to be taken in Florida. The legislature has no desire to have this conversation. Look, I tried to have it for years, and so you're going to see this. You're going to see this come through as a constitutional amendment. I don't know the year that it ultimately passes, but this is not the first time you're going to see it. It's going to come back year after year after year, and it'd be better to get the tax revenue and set up the regulatory structure now, versus continue to have a growing black market in the state. Continue to have this pathway where people use the medical system to get to adult use.
Now, there is in SB 8, which you were involved in putting together, of a sunset clause for the medical cannabis market. And there was also a sunset.
He froze.
For that 20. But do you see the legislature acting on that sunset clause and just dropping the entire medical program if the adult use passes?
No, because they have a constitutional amendment. Well, no, I don't see them doing that. No, I don't think they will. I think people will still. I think they'll still probably have a medical piece to it, just for cover, and because they want there is that tax-free benefit to that, and they're not going to. They want the tax-free side of it for those who are truly have medical needs, and I think the industry would argue for that too.
What happened with
if you look at every single state that was a medical state first and then went to adult use, their medical market has diminished in every single way.
100%. I totally agree.
The same thing ultimately will happen in Florida.
Yes.
It'll become strictly an adult use market. But I don't. And Senator, you said that you think that was that if it was moved to Schedule 3, that it would that an adult use initiative would pass even faster. Am I
no,
correct?
I think that it proliferates around the country faster.
But Schedule, I totally disagree with that, because if you look how Schedule 3 drugs have to be sold and administered, I believe that Schedule 3 would hamper everything that has every bit of progress that has happened within the cannabis industry, because Schedule 3 drugs have to be administered by a pharmacy. Not to mention,
Yeah, but I mean,
there's
cannabis is
there's
Schedule
very
1
few
right now,
companies
and
that
it's
are even going to be able to pay to get SKUs through a FDA hearing in order to even be able to sell these products under a Schedule 3
Yeah, but they
under a
definitely
Schedule
can't
3
schedule
structure.
them or what are they? Schedule 1, Schedule 2 today. I mean, like
Yeah,
that.
well, this is
what
the thing, is the FDA doesn't have jurisdiction over Schedule 1 drugs, and that's the reason that you see the proliferation of cannabis in the way that it is. Once the FDA does have jurisdiction, the FDA already has drug procurement on CBD for Epidiolex, and has drug preclusion on THC for Marinol. So therefore, those are what you're basically going to have. You're
maybe,
not
maybe.
going to have products because those haven't gone through an FDA process. You're not going to have the product and selection that even your most smallest store has now under a Schedule 3.
Well, two things I want to say. One, the fact that we have Republicans on the show talking about cannabis is in the wrong schedule is amazing. Because if you go back to the Nixon administration, or even the Reagan or Bush administrations, conversations would not be happening. So I got to say, NORML has come a long way in 50 plus years of changing the narrative. And Senator Brandis even said it, that he feels as though a reduced schedule kind of normalizes things. Jason, I get your point. There is no way we will ever have herbal flower like we do now in dispensaries under an FDA regime, which again just further proves that Schedule 3 isn't the right schedule either.
No,
but we are
schedule.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
only option. There's no other option but descheduling it.
However, the DEA, being since its inception, has been an agency striving to try and validate its budget ever since it was the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and we saw the sensationalism around cannabis prohibition in the first place. So that's really the hardest part of cracking this whole thing. I mean, NORML won a DEA case in 1988 where a judge, said, "Hey, cannabis has medicinal value," and the DEA ignored their own administrative judges. So this is where we are today. Is the Biden administration. FDA, Health and Human Services, and DEA, even among an administration that seems to purport to have it all together, has interfighting between these agencies.
I think you're going to see the main thing that I think it really helps with is it allows them to move into the banking world. It allows them to move into the kind of the non-cash side of the business, and it will help streamline the cash flow of the business.
They could just pass safe banking if they want.
They could, sure, absolutely. So I think
that's all they got to do that. That's an easy layup.
Listen,
the legislation's already there.
Sure. Listen,
Schedule 3 is a nightmare, bro. Is a nightmare, and I can't believe that the cannabis industry thinks that getting 280E relief in exchange for Schedule 3 is enough to move it to Schedule 3. These people are out of their minds and are going to sandbag the whole industry and hand it directly over to the pharmaceutical industry, and that's what Schedule 3 does.
Well, our researchers at NORML have said that Schedule 3 is not going to change the current disconnect between federal and state guidelines, which means we're going to be Schedule 3, but then we're still going to have this legal gray area, if you will. And again, it would be fine if we got more direction from the Department of Justice. And again, we see time and time again in the Commerce and Science appropriation bills, guidelines for not using federal enforcement dollars to attack medical systems and to attack adult use states. So maybe that status quo may continue. What bothers me is the fact that this is being used kind of as a bargaining chip in this election, because we've seen leaders in the Senate say, "Oh, well, we're not really going to take any action on this until we know if we're going to have control of the House and Senate after the election." And after these debates are going, I'm not optimistic that there's going to be one party control of the government out in November.
You said the D word, didn't you? Dang, I was hoping we wouldn't even bring that up.
Kano, you're a master of the Google check. Can you show us a quick comparison of what the mandatory minimums are for getting caught with a Schedule 3 drug? Because that's going to be happening.
While Kano's doing that, I've got a question for you, Jason. First off, I want to say that I completely agree with you on Schedule 3. The proper way is to deschedule it. But one thing that makes me optimistic about Schedule 3 is that it opens up for research. And I think if we have the ability to research properly in this country, it's going to be hard to keep it at Schedule 3 for very long.
I don't buy that. I don't buy that for a second. I don't buy that for a second, because here's the reality, is that we have been working for decades to create enough political muster, okay, to be able to have cannabis as a hot button issue on this. Okay, and let me tell you what's going to happen once it goes to Schedule 3. There will be no more gunpowder left in our coffers for a political movement whatsoever. In regards, legislators are going to say, "Oh, you know what? No, we dealt with that. It's Schedule 3, da 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 da," and it's going to get swiped underneath the rug. And there's going to be more people going to jail because of it being a Schedule 3 drug, and the law penalties that are in regards with that. You're not going to have this adult use type of market in that sense, because you're going to have a prescription for a Schedule 3 drug. So this is going to be a total flop, in my opinion.
Well, as far as research is concerned, we had both Matt Gaetz in the House going ahead and putting through a bill that involves research. And earlier than that, we had Charlie Crist put out a bill when he was still in the legislature, in the national legislature, to open up research. And both of them didn't even get a committee hearing. They just stopped. Now, is that just part of the inaction that we get from DC?
Gary, I don't care about any of the research personally, because the reality of it is we've been having experiments with cannabis for the last 80 years. Okay. And so we all pretty much have a general idea of what is good with cannabis and whatnot. Now, granted, yes, there's a lot of different isolating these different individual compounds and whatnot, but then that's a whole pharmaceutical play when you're isolating these compounds. And so I'm all about the whole plant medicine personally, and about the plant flower and whatnot. And Schedule 3 is just not a way to go.
I'm going to be the rare politician who tells you. I'm going to be the rare politician who tells you, like, when he doesn't know things. And I don't understand the whole how the regulatory structure at the federal government, from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 to all of this stuff, is ultimately going to play out. I have. Look, you want to talk about state government? I can talk about this, but you guys know way more about this than I do on that topic.
Mm-hmm. I can tell you that the Controlled Substance Act actually had a clause which said that the Attorney General could deschedule it at any time, and that never happened.
I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true.
Well, here's the thing too. We discussed this as the normal board of directors. The United States. War on drugs has proliferated not just here on our shores, but internationally. There are international treaties that we would actually have to give the middle finger to actually legalize or deschedule cannabis in this country. And so there's also international law that plays into this. I know for a lot of people who are sovereign America should be able to do what it wants, patriots, that doesn't sit well. But there are also international laws that need to change in drug conventions that we've signed on to.
Kano, in regards with that, we fund a majority of those countries in the first place. So those countries are going to follow along with whatever we do. And those treaties will just have to get ripped up and thrown in the paper shredder and redrafted.
Now
just amend them.
Now, we're a constitutional republic. So the way when we certify treaties, I mean, it to ignore a treaty, like you had to rip it up, is technically a constitutional violation.
No, you can amend treaties.
True. I'm not saying we can. I'm saying that, to just ignore it entirely. But we ignore treaties all the time, like space-based weapons, that sort of thing.
Well, the single convention got thrown out this last week at the UN. It has been 2 years now since the single convention fell in from the UN. That basically was the thing that Altslinger put together back in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
That changed a lot of those treaties automatically. So you can do it on an umbrella basis as well as a per country basis as well. But it can be done.
Well, yeah. I just want to say NORML's official stance in all of this is that we believe the hemp market can exist in the same space as an adult use market. So,
100%.
All in all, what I would like to see in the implementation of this is that if we're going to give people first crack at breaking up vertical integration and getting into this industry, you have all these hemp businesses, which a vast majority of them have done right, like Carlos and some of his colleagues in the industry. Those should be the folks that we give an opportunity to. Some of them already have storefronts. Some of them, have done best business practices.
Right.
You know?
And this is why, right, if you got rid of the vertical integration structure, they would be the first to get the licenses for the retail, for just the retail, which is what Florida should move to.
Mm-hmm.
So in New York, you would be rallying behind licensing all the bodegas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
New York is a mess.
What do you think?
I'll give you that.
Of that, Senator?
What? Sorry, ask the question again.
What do you think the chances are of hemp companies becoming retailers in the cannabis space?
I mean, hard to know the future, but I think that's ultimately where even the True Leaves and the Suteros want to go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not buying that.
No, listen. Here's
wants
why.
to monopolize this market 100%.
No, it's not. I don't think so. I think they would like to have 500 storefronts.
Yeah.
And have 200 be theirs, and be retailing to 300 other people.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's how they want to grow their business.
A lot of money.
Jeff, but see now you have to understand that from another retailer's. Why do you want to have another retail brand in your store? Why are you going to be advertising and giving shelf space to another retail brand that is a retail competitor to yours? So I can't sit with that realization, because like what happened here in California, Cresco came out to California, and in the beginning of legalization, they made a whole bunch of products and they were all calling Cresco Labs, but not a single store wanted to carry those because it was an MSO branded product.
Mm.
Oh wow,
that's interesting.
And Cresco packed their stuff up and left California.
Well, shit, dude.
Right, but they could have branded. They could have off-branded it. They could have white labeled it. They could have done all kinds of things.
Yeah, but you're still going to have the internet trolls letting everybody know that that's a Cresco type of product and whatnot. And so, they're like, yeah, it wouldn't have happened as fast, but nonetheless, it was a total blunder when these MSOs try to market themselves.
So I just think I think that's how these companies see this thing playing out. And I think that's ultimately what's going to happen when we go to adult use, is they're going to they eventually, I don't know when, but they will eventually de-verticalize this process. They will allow for multiple license holders, and they will allow for the market to grow. And then what the existing MMTCs want to do is be able to sell into that marketplace. They don't want to be restricted to their vertical integrated lines. If the market is 5 times the size now, and so they want to be able to sell into other retail facilities.
And Jason, I gotta say, you gave a little bit of shit to unions earlier, but some of the unions have been able to run True Leave out of other states. So, if you want to go after the MSOs, hey, let the unions get behind them and demand that they actually treat their workers with safe practices.
I mean, I'll put it to you straight up like this. I think it's absolutely appalling the fact that True Leave was fined only $350,000 for the loss of a life in their facility in Massachusetts is absolutely appalling. That OSHA only fined them like $40,000 on top of it, and that is just a travesty all in itself.
Indeed. And G Leaf had a death in Illinois, so there's definitely a need for worker safety in these places, and definitely it's a space.
I don't think the unions are the best mechanism for that. In my opinion, I think that these unions basically fleece the employees and don't give them enough in return for fleecing their wages. That's my personal opinion on it.
Well, listen, it's Florida. I don't worry about the unions in Florida.
Right? Hey, that's right. It's a right to work state, baby.
It's a right to work state. We're not going to have that.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, I've been dying to ask you this question. Earlier, you came to the aid of the governor when I was talking a little bit of crap. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to ask you this. Can you respond to his no on 3 stance and how?
I mean, I'm a no on 3 stance, and I think all of you guys should be a no on 3 stance too, just for the simple fact that it doesn't allow for home grow cultivation. Just that part alone.
It's single subject rule, like it can't.
It's not even single subject. I think it's more that we're trying to pass something, and that is a bridge too far. If you started doing home grow,
bad bill. It's a bad bill.
Then you're going to wait another 5-10 years. You're going to have all these people. getting
say 4
misdemeanors
years.
for marijuana when you could have adult use today, and then you can grow into that down the road.
I mean,
Look,
Specifically,
But they're not
can you
gonna grow into it.
respond? Can
It's-
you
it's-
respond to him saying that the quality of life in Florida would go down if there's legalization, and how it'll smell like
No,
weed
the
everywhere?
quality of life isn't going to go down if there's legalization, and there's nothing that prohibits the legislature for allowing home grow down the road without a constitutional amendment. These things can happen simultaneously. It's better to get what you can today, like move the ball as far as you can today, versus saying, well, we're going to wait a decade so that we can get the perfect legislature in place to allow for home grow. I just don't think that's viable, or it's good for what's good for Floridians. I think the best thing you can do is vote yes on 3 and then work to lobby the legislature over time for home grow.
Obviously we couldn't have it. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Gary.
Obviously we couldn't have home grow on this particular ballot measure because of the fact we have the single subject thing, and they would be rejected by the Supreme Court and would not go anywhere. So that's one thing. Now, I did create a bill that allows that the legislature could actually pass, that allows for them to be able to count how many plants everybody has and how many plants they actually harvest.
Okay.
And
Yeah, look,
gives
the biggest
grow.
The group.
And I showed it to you, Jeffrey. I showed it to Wilton Simpson. At first, he liked it, but then I think the factory farmer in him kind of kicked in, and he said, "Absolutely not."
No, it's not that. It's the sheriffs kicked in. The strongest lobbying organization in Florida is the Sheriff's Association.
That's true.
The sheriffs don't want it. The sheriffs don't want it because they don't want to have to go into people's houses and see the crib next to 40 grow plants, right? Like that's what they're going to show you. They're going to show you pictures of home grow where somebody's got a double wide trailer and they've got their 2-month-old in a crib and 30 grow plants around it. And the sheriffs are going to show that one picture, and that's going to scare legislators off. And that's why that's why they've argued against it. And so quietly behind the scenes, that's who's against home grow more so than virtually anybody else is the sheriffs. And the legislature just doesn't want to talk about it, at least not until it's legalized. Once it's legalized and we can show, and they have certain parameters for when you can do home grow and where you can do home grow, then people will be much more warm to the idea. But you've got to first legalize it. It's just too much for them to take on in one bite. They don't want to. Allowing for home grow alongside adult use is just too much for this legislature.
I just don't see who is going to fund a home grow standalone initiative, or even 2, where that political muster will be for voters to pass something like that with them having adult use.
In California, was it all in one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't like. In
Well,
other states,
I mean, here in California,
Democrats.
we had SB 420 is what allowed for legal home cultivation.
Okay, so it did break it up, right? So they passed.
But that was a move by the legislature prior to any voter amendment of legalization. That was it back in 2010. We didn't have legalization until 2018.
Okay. But I think whether the order is the same, I think ultimately you're going to see it that's how it's going to play out. It will pass as adult use on the ballot first, and then down the road it will pass via some legislative action to allow home grow.
I just don't see it. I just don't see it ever passing. I don't see Floridians ever getting home grow if they don't get it
all combined into one. I don't see it passing for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
It's a long time.
Yeah. Well, the implementation.
The legislature is so afraid of.
Take the first down.
Yeah.
Take it. Yeah. And then build off of it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say the implementation bill of Amendment 3, should it pass, would be the first step in addressing any of these shortcomings in the system, whether it's breaking up vertical integration and issuing out micro licenses or making new license classes or even creating any type of home grow structure. The implementation of the amendment is what we've seen time and time again from the Florida legislature. Voters pass an amendment, and then the legislature takes it as a framework and runs with it. Sometimes you don't get what you vote for. Like when we voted for Amendment 2, a lot of people were in the impression we would have whole plant access, that they would be selling clones, that we would have home grow, and we didn't get that in Amendment 2's implementation. So, and here we are with Amendment 3's implementation. part of it, you see this pessimism. That I see it coming from Jason, Senator, is that we've not seen the legislature really be bold in taking bold steps in implementation. But
where have you seen the legislature be bold? Just in any area.
I mean, I gotta say, since you left, I haven't seen anybody
Culture
with any
wars.
balls. I haven't seen anybody with any balls in the legislature to say, "Look, this is the right way to do things."
Okay, guys, I got a little bit of a surprise for y'all. I come from a conservative Cuban family from South Florida, and I have a father who's very conservative, very Cuban, who has his heart right in the right place. And I want to introduce my father to you guys today. My Cuban dad. Hey, Poppy.
Hi, guys.
What's going on?
Oh, not much. I just got through mass.
That's how.
So I'm a conservative, Cuban, Catholic, all the way.
So you're on right now with one of the best senators Florida has ever had, Jeff Brandes, and with the highest Republican. I wanted to see if you had any questions for them. So go for it, Poppy.
Well, number one, how is it amendment number 3 going to be implemented? What are you guys going to do about it?
Well, neither.
Well, it has to pass first, right? It has to pass first, and it has to pass with 60% of the vote, which is a very high threshold. Is it likely to pass? I think it is. And if it doesn't pass this year, I think it'll be back on the ballot in a couple of years. Mm-hmm. How it gets implemented, it depends on the legislature at the time. I don't know how it gets implemented, other than it will allow for legalized adult use. I think the most likely way it gets implemented is they keep the vertically integrated structure, and they allow adult use out of the existing MMTCs.
So if you're going to say depends on the legislator and how it gets implemented, maybe you should give us a strategy for voting. What would be the best way to vote properly for this amendment?
Well, I mean, I think listen, I'm of the opinion that you should vote for it. I'm of the opinion you should vote for it because it's a step in the right direction. Is it everything we want? No. Is it perfect? No. Nothing the legislature does is perfect, right? But it now decriminalizes and opens up a whole new world that should reduce the black market in the state of Florida, that should help provide a legal pathway for people to engage in an activity they're already engaging in just illegally, or using the medical marijuana system to engage in it legally. And to me, that's the right way to go. And then we should focus on home grow and these other issues down the road. Those are discussions for a later date once this passes. But I don't see for a long time it passing with adult use and home grow on the same amendment.
Mm-hmm. You got any other questions, Bob?
Well, the one thing that I think you all need to work on from day one, I was very much anti-pot, anti-anything. And I had a son that really convinced me and educated me and changed me 180 degrees. And I think a lot of the things that you got to do is go back to education. You really have to concentrate on educating the crowd and educating everybody that is open-minded. And that's part of the implementation as well. There has to be a big education push. It's not just voting it and getting it into law, but you have to dedicate a big part of your budget to educating the people.
100% agree. And I think the other thing that you're going to see is the same regulatory structure as where you can actually utilize medical marijuana will be brought into the structure of where we can use adult use, right? It's going to be private facilities, private homes, private spaces. That's where you're going to be able to use it. You're not going to see it being proliferated. That's the governor's angle of attacking it is, well, it's going to be like California or like, other states, Colorado, where you can use it anywhere and you smell it everywhere. I think Florida has done a good job in the sense of medical marijuana, where you really don't get that exposure to it, and I think they will try to continue that on in adult use.
Mm-hmm.
I have something just about a minute to add. Why I am so conservative. I was 18 years old, and my first job at a bank, I was a bus boy, basically carrying things from one place to another. And at 18 years old, because I didn't agree with the government there, they threw me into the pits around the Moro Castle for 13 days until they could control what was being a revolution against Fidel Castro. So we really have to be very concerned about our freedoms, and that's one of the reasons that I am afraid and why I'm so conservative, and I don't want a lot of the progressive agenda and the woke agenda. But I know in that I respect my son, but that's the way I feel.
I love you.
You should have your dad on more often, bro. He's talking about this woke agenda going on.
I don't know, Jason. I think you're a little woke over there.
No, I mean I am because it's early in the morning, but that's about it.
Poppy, I love your shirt, by the way. Very, very patriotic.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Listen, Poppy,
I love this country.
We're gonna let you get back to church, okay? But
Okay.
Thanks for talking to our guests.
Thank you, guys. I love your show.
Thank you. That's my Poppy.
I love Poppy.
Yeah.
He's the man.
Yeah, I love that he's kept his Jesse Arnaz accent. That was so nice.
You guys saw that picture in the intro?
Yeah.
Yes, amazing. Now, Jason, one thing, in Carlos's father touched on it is, our freedoms in this country, are always one or two elections away from returned, and the freedoms that people have experienced in other countries with cannabis reform, we're now seeing a reversal on. High at Night News actually has done a report on what's happening in Thailand. They've reversed course entirely from being able to buy a clone on the side of a road for $2 to now being recriminalized. We've seen similar things happen in Oregon, where they went from all drugs decriminalized to now recriminalizing things. I know you have a spot coming up here talking about it. Carlos, why don't you flash the graphic and folks can tune in? And Jason, tell us about your segment that you got on Thailand.
Yeah, so I recently started.
That's the wrong button. There you go.
Yes. So I recently started the Sunday special report that we release at 9 a.m. Pacific and high noon on the East Coast on Sundays. And this one is a deep dive into Thailand. I had my good friend Filthy of the Lavender Boys come on, who holds a number of medical licenses out there in Thailand. And the job was to really see exactly what is going on in Thailand and to dispel a lot of the rumors, which like one of the things that you mentioned is there is a pathway. One of the things that I learned, at least with talking with Filthy, is that there is a pathway for all retailers and whatnot in Thailand, but they have to work it through the medical system, through the government. So whether or not they want to do that or not is a totally different thing, and we'll see what happens there in Thailand. But there basically are just reverting to use only type of market there in Thailand.
Wow.
Thailand, are they actually considering exiting?
I have no clue what Cookies is up to in that. I have no clue.
Well, I want to say something and send a message to, the conservatives out there. One of the biggest issues that is now cropping up here in America is actually Chinese-funded and staffed marijuana farms springing up across the country.
Mm-hmm.
New Mexico had agents raid and found thousands of cannabis plants beyond state laws that were being run essentially by underfed, shell-shocked Chinese workers. Human trafficking is a major problem that we have in the modern era, and we're seeing basically folks being human trafficked into this country to run these illegal farms all over the U.S. if we want to create a cut out these folks' money supply, if we want to cut off one of our greatest adversaries, China, from making money here on U.S. shores, just as we've done with the Mexican cartels, not selling marijuana like they used to, they've had to switch to other drugs, then legalizing it is the safest route to do that. For us to grow our own bud, we grow bud better in America than anybody else does. And again, this is a greater argument for home grow too, is that we can grow our own bud much better than these multi-state operators as well. So in regards to national security, I make a plea to the conservatives out there that control the various state governments. Let's move forward with adopting legalization. And to Congress, let's go ahead and move for descheduling. I would love to see the congressional leadership, Senator Schumer, Senator Wyden, get their bill out there. I want to see the House actually move some bills, whether it's the MORE Act or the States Act. I don't care at this point. I just want to see some type of movement. And we have just a few folks sprinkled here and there that seem to be holding up the process. And again, elections playing into what they are. If the elections don't go the way either party wants, I would love to see this lame duck session of Congress take some bold action and actually move on this, because if we have a split Congress, I just don't foresee any action on cannabis at the federal level for the next 4 years.
Grover Cleveland was actually able to get the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1884 pushed through, which we actually had to walk back approximately 20 years later when the Emperor of China decided to cut off all trade unless we lifted it.
Gary knows this because he was lobbying back then.
Yes.
Are you saying we should stay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
that's right, young man. You should not call me a boomer.
Maine is experiencing a lot of that as well, Kano. There was just a big story that we covered in regards with Maine. I know even some of the federal senators from Maine have gone to have conversations and seeking answers from different governmental agencies in regards to making sure that they're aware of these actions that are happening within their state. And so it is a big national security issue that is going on.
So maybe we should build a Great Wall.
I'm all for it. I ain't got no problem with that.
Gary, I mean, you think about it, with the amount of shipping that comes into this country, port security is subpar in a lot of ways. I remember studying at the University of South Florida, for every one shipment that gets hit, 11 shipments get through. So,
But look, the reason that you have such proliferation of fentanyl and the challenges of fentanyl should be driving states towards legalizing and regulating adult use.
Agreed.
Right?
Yep.
This is the major challenge. People are getting laced product on the street from third parties that they don't know the quality and content of, and this is only going to get worse. And the drugs like fentanyl,
laced
what?
product,
Yeah,
laced
sure.
product. There is no counts of fentanyl laced marijuana. That is total.
Even in edibles?
No, that's total BS.
Okay.
That's total BS. That's total.
I'll totally
I
stand corrected if that's
gotta
the
call
case.
that out. That is not true. That is not reality. There was only one case that was with anything, and it was involving a scale that people were weighing fentanyl on, and then they weighed some weed on it, and that's the only case that has ever happened in the United States in regard to fentanyl, marijuana, whatever the hell, and that is just not reality.
Okay, then I stand corrected, because that was my at least common knowledge understanding that part of the problem that we were having with fentanyl was laced drugs, right? And that other drugs were being
fentanyl is a
added
problem. Fentanyl is a problem all within itself, and it is its own problem. Okay, it is not even a problem; it's an epidemic that is throughout our streets, throughout all 50 states throughout the country, and all of this fentanyl comes from China through Mexico to the U.S. And that's just reality. And whether or not people want to believe it or listen to it or whatnot, but that's what the hell's happening.
Oh, I know. I totally understand that. My understanding was that fentanyl was being added to other products as a cheap way to cut the product in order and improve its potency.
Now that's other drugs, but that's not that's like cocaine, that's heroin, that's other drugs that are already in that powder based form is what they are using. But it also gets people more, gets them to want and crave that more, and so makes it more addictive than it currently is on those other substances. But there is absolutely zero reports that have been based in fact in regards with lacing.
So I'm gonna chat GBT it, but I'll take your word for it.
Well,
Actually,
hold on. Jason, I appreciate you, speaking up. And Senator, nobody faults you for that, because even the governor of Ohio repeated that same talking point. It seems to be a popular talking point among Republican politicians. But I'm looking here
but amongst the general public, I think that's how they think about it.
And I'm reading here off of drugfree.org, the Partnership to End Addiction. The short answer is that there is no solid evidence between marijuana being laced with fentanyl, and they even give the reasons why. Number one, burning destroys the fentanyl. Vape pen temperatures are too low, and the liver breaks down edibles, and so the risk is very low, because fentanyl will also be broken down by the liver, and there's no profit to be made of sprinkling fentanyl on weed. The police and media have really overblown this out of proportion. But again, you talked about it. If the largest lobby in Florida is the sheriffs, and they need to validate overinflated budgets from state and local governments, then of course it's scaring people. But the DEA is the key thing in all this. There are no DEA alerts saying that there's a marijuana-laced fentanyl. So
you don't need a DEA alert to be able to know what's going on. Senator, I know you probably still got Sheriffs Naco and Gualtieri on speed dial, but I can tell you that I've talked to both of them. And there have been cases in Zephyr Hills over here where a family of 4 went and bought some cannabis from a bar, and they didn't have anything else but the cannabis they bought that day, and they all died of fentanyl overdose that night. It wasn't necessarily that it burnt. It was because of the fact that they're in the rolling rooms, there is fentanyl dust in the air, because that stuff is so light. And if you don't have negative barometric pressure, you will have it falling on everything, including the scales and everything else. So when you put a joint in your mouth that has fentanyl on the outside, you put it into your oral mucosa, and then you just got zapped. And that is how these people are actually getting overdosed and dying from fentanyl from using cannabis, not because it's laced on purpose, but because the people don't take the care and necessary steps to prevent it from happening.
Well, are you saying that illegal drug dealers?
He agrees with you, right? That it's
Gary, I think you're way off base with that.
And I think so. Listen, I think that you're probably right, based on my ChatGPT research that was just conducted. It largely confirms what you're saying. So I'm totally ready to stand corrected. Again, I will absolutely admit when I'm wrong, but it was my common knowledge and belief that was the case, and I think that's probably the common knowledge and belief of many people.
Senator, hold on, everybody. I just want to take a second to say thank you to Senator Brandes. This is probably the first time in a long time that a Republican has been told that he's had misinformation and did not bring up Hunter Biden's laptop. I appreciate it very much.
Senator, I'm more than happy to help you in regards with any of these things, and help message to these other conservative legislators and whatnot, as to what is the truth and what is falsified information.
As soon as you move from California, they will accept your help and information.
Oh, trust me, no, I am a resident at Mar-a-Lago quite often. So.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Just tell them that's where just move your home address there, and then you'll have carte blanche.
I'm working on it. If I could work in Palm Beach through the week and then live in Miami on the weekends, that would be my ideal schedule.
Yeah, and as long as you're here a majority of the year, you get the Florida tax status, and you could, your income will go up 20% just by moving state lines.
That's right.
Gentlemen, I know we're over time, but before we close out the show, we've talked a lot today about criminal justice reform, and there seems to be, that's always seems to be like a volleyball between Republicans and Democrats, and who can seem to do the right thing by the people versus who seems soft on crime. And so one of the things that affects cannabis more than anything is reversing the harms and damages of 80 years of cannabis prohibition, of over 50 years of the war on drugs. And so looking at expungements, we saw the governor of Maryland, Democratic Governor Westmore, recently hand out, 170 some thousand, marijuana pardons, but pardons are not expungements. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the key thing, is that you want to get student loans, you want to get a job, you want to have a clear record, you want to be able to go into that competitive interview and not have to declare that you got popped at 21 for smoking a joint, and so the one thing that irritates irritated me this week was Republican Governor Jeff Landry of Louisiana vetoed legislation that would have provided the executive branch in that state with the ability to grant expedited pardons to those with first-time marijuana possession convictions. And his reasoning was this was an attempt to have Louisiana accept President Biden's invitation for states to join his soft on crime, no consequences for criminal agenda. I mean, does that seem a little bit absurd and a little too partisan in common sense legislation?
So ask me the question specifically again, because there was a lot of context around the question.
So the governor of Louisiana vetoed legislation that will allow them to have expedited pardon process for first-time marijuana offenders.
First of all, Louisiana is not an adult use state, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's the South, right? Like this. Why would this be surprising, right? I mean, to me, this is just how a Louisiana governor would act. I'm not surprised at all by that. Now, if you had told me this is happening in California or other states, I'd be shocked, right? But this is the South, and this is a conservative area, and they're just trying to figure this stuff out. And they're realizing, they're trying to figure out where a majority of their population is. And so they're going with what he believes the community wants. They don't want these individuals to be expunged. Would I agree with an expungement for this? Absolutely. But again, I'm not the governor of Louisiana. So these things don't shock me or surprise me. It doesn't shock me or surprise me that DeSantis comes out against Amendment 3. I mean, he still has presidential aspirations in his future, and he thinks that this is where a majority of his Republicans are nationally. If the majority of the Republicans nationally were on the other side, I guarantee he'd be on that side. So these things shouldn't shock or surprise you, especially in the South, how these things are playing out.
It's ironic because he also signed a bill to decriminalize paraphernalia. So paraphernalia is okay to decriminalize, but expungements are a bridge too far.
Well, personally, I would get rid of the clemency board and make it a nonpartisan board as opposed to the cabinet. I could see that working a hell of a lot better than the system we have right now.
Anything would work better than the system we have right now.
Before we end the show today, I kind of want to push the focus back on Florida. The last time, the last show that we had, I mentioned really quickly that my personal stance is that I'm voting yes on 3, but I've personally boycotted True Leave. And I got a little bit of flack for that. I got a little bit of flack from the no on 3 people saying, how could you be yes on 3 and trust True Leave, even though you're not shopping there? And I got flack from yes on 3 people for being against True Leave, I guess. What do you guys, and this question is for everybody here, and people in the chat, what do you guys think of that as like a strategy for this organization to push the yes on 3 agenda, but to tell people, listen, like, you don't have to support True Leave to be yes on 3?
Well, Carlos, as our executive director, let me field that first. And as a national board member of Normal, there is no world where we do not take the opportunity to end the felony arrest in Florida for 20 grams or more. And this is that opportunity. Like Senator Brandis said, this is the opportunity. Is it a deal with the devil in some ways? Look, I don't trust Walmart to sell me meat, so I wouldn't trust True Leave to sell me weed. And that's my stance on it.
That's absolutely. I've seen pictures from their grow facility, all the mold and shit, all the shit that they did to the hemp.
They have deaths from mold.
Yeah. Why would anybody ever want to buy cannabis from them?
Yeah. Which is ironic because Wilton Simpson wants to crack down on you guys, but we're not seeing that crackdown on these MMTCs. So I would like to see harder enforcement on them, if anything.
Well,
Listen, I think you should vote yes on 3, and look, you can choose to boycott whoever you want. This is a free society, and you get to choose where that is. I don't think I don't think that that's going to be meaningful or successful at all. But I think ultimately, you get to choose where you want. I'm a libertarian, capital L, Republican, little r. I want freedom. I want more freedom for people, and I think Amendment 3 is more freedom. And I understand how Florida works and how the political system works is you take your gains where you can get them. And if there is no perfect piece of legislation, but we want to move the freedom needle forward, and Amendment 3 does that, in my opinion.
Well, that actually segues to my next question. In the beginning of the whole chat debacle that's going on during this episode, a lot of people wanted me to ask you guys about THCA flower. Now, the idea is voting yes on 3 is going to take away our freedoms because we're already free to consume hemp THCA flower. Yet I have a red stop sale ticket on my THCA flower in the back there. What do you guys think? Is weed already legal through THCA flower?
Yes, weed got legalized under the Farm Bill originally because because it all still has the same definition as far as cannabis sativa L, and the only difference is some arbitrary THC percentage by dry weight, which is totally ridiculous. So yes, cannabis is 100% federally legal. It just all about what type of label you put on it.
What do you guys think about that?
Well, you said cannabis sativa. What if I want to smoke cannabis indica?
No, well, cannabis sativa L is the definition under the Controlled Substances Act for marijuana, for cannabis, for hemp, for all of it.
You know, the 2025 Farm Bill is still under debate in the House with appropriation stuff. There is an effort by the MSOs to outlaw, novel and intoxicating cannabinoids in the exception definition that exists.
That's not going nowhere.
Yeah, and as you said, in the House there might be some movement, but in the Senate doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere. So
that's DOA, and once those 2 bills go for reconciliation, even if that language does pass in the House, that'll get repped out in a reconciliation before it would go to the president's desk.
Now, Jason, you all control the House. Why would you all want to do that?
In all honesty, it's not us doing it. I believe that was a ops by someone, by like a Project Sam specialist type of thing, or maybe even some MSO could have been doing that, because you have some no name member of Congress that no one had ever heard of until this whole amendment, and all of a sudden, to me, that was just a favor that they did for, and I don't think.
Gotcha. Well, I got to say thank you, Jason. Thank you, Senator Brandis, for joining us today. Senator Brandis, if you ever choose to run again statewide, I think you would make a great Republican governor of Florida, because you got a solid head on your shoulders. And for
the love of God, let's make that. How can we persuade you to do that? It's like, I will give you a bunch of THCA flower.
No, we'll have to throw you a fundraiser at Mar-a-Lago, Jeff.
Oh yeah.
All right, so this is the portion of the show where we give our guests the opportunity to look in the camera, tell people, how they can support them, who they are, blah, blah, blah. So let's go ahead and hit up the highest Republican first. Jason.
Yes, I am Jason Beck. I am the highest Republican, and you can find me every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific and high noon on the East Coast at High at 9 News. We are America's #1 daily cannabis news show.
I really like that you call yourself the highest Republican. I was the highest person at Nova Business School at one point.
Yeah.
So
I'm all about those straight A's, bro.
Senator Brandis. Oh, you're not Senator Brandis.
Senator for life.
That's it. Well, first of all, thank you all for having me on. I'm Jeff Brandis. I run the Florida Policy Project, which doesn't specifically focus on marijuana business, the industry, but I know a little bit about it. But we focus on best practices throughout the country and trying to bring those ideas to Florida. My big takeaway after 12 years is everything in Tallahassee is tactical. There is no strategy. And so we focus on 4 areas that typically don't get a lot of focus: prison, criminal justice reform, transportation, housing, and insurance. And we just want to get Florida to the best practice. What is the best practice in the country? And so we try to focus on those questions. We utilize state-based universities and national experts to come up with what the best practices are. And then we write reports for the legislature and try to educate them on where Florida needs to move. It's been a great adventure. We've just started in March of 2023. We've done 20 reports. We have reports coming out on condos, auto insurance, why signal light timing is probably the best ROI in transportation. And then we're going to do a deep dive into best practices for women that are incarcerated, because we think that's an under-discussed issue. But it's my love for public policy, my love for finding at scalable solutions for difficult public policy problems, and helping the legislature, who frankly doesn't really have a context for a lot of these conversations, get educated, and then understand how other states are doing it better. Listen, we have 50 states that are running 50 different laboratory experiments. a lot of them are having better success than what Florida is with its current problems. And so we should just adopt the best practices, and then we can work beyond, moving beyond what is the nationwide best practices. But in so many areas of public policy, Florida isn't even close to the areas of best practices. 75% of our prisons are not air conditioned. Florida pays 4 times the national average in property insurance than the rest of the country. Housing is, everybody can see the struggle that Florida's having, and housing, dealing with 1,000 people moving to Florida every single day. We have real challenges. There are real solutions, and the Florida Policy Project looks to bring those to the legislature.
Yeah, I learned from you, Senator Brandis, that Florida doesn't really have that many private prisons.
No, it doesn't. It only has 6 or 7 private prisons out of its over 50 or 60 institutions.
Wow.
Now, best of luck with housing and insurance. Having been an economy based on growth for so long, it was inevitable that kind of thing was going on, especially in a hurricane zone. Obviously, the insurance has gone crazy. The housing system has gone crazy. So you're going to have a lot of. I wish you all the best of luck, and I hope that you go back to talking about autonomous cars, because my wife being blind, I can tell you that the transportation disadvantaged folks are high, and not in that sense, but the other sense.
Well, we do our Florida Automated Vehicle Summit, which is a summit I put on every year, is September 4th through the 6th this year in Tampa. So come on down to that. We talk about the future of mobility. I've hosted it now for 12 years. We have about 650, 700 attendees every year, and it's by far the best, most robust transportation conversation in the state. We just finished a conversation with 270 people on housing that we had planned for 150. We got 270, and then we had to cut off registration. So look, there is an absolute need for policy conversations in the state of Florida that focus on the practices that work best in the country, and we're excited to help lead those conversations.
Can't think of a better man.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you too for being on the show. We need more Republicans like this, man.
Appreciate y'all.
Yes, fighting freedom and having fun, Carlos.
Well, to everybody, tune in next week, because next week we're going to be switching things up and bringing on one of the most liberal legislators in the state of Florida, Representative Anna Escamani. So for folks, same time, 11 Eastern, and jump in the rotation each and every Sunday. Hit that like and subscribe button if you're watching us on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook. We want to continue to grow this following and bring you the great show and great guests that we have each and every week here with Suncoast Normal in the rotation.
And I guess that's it. Anybody else have